Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 165. Thank you for joining us. Today, Kolbe homeschooling mother, Jennell Kvistad, joins Bonnie and I to continue a conversation that began at our Kolbe graduation. Our conversation ranges from continuing to parent when our children graduate from Kolbe Academy, to living and homeschooling on an island, and to Jennell's call and journey to the Catholic Church. We had a great time speaking with Jennell, and I'm glad you're here to join us. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. Good to see you. How's the week going?
Hi, Bonnie. It's going well. There's been a lot of meetings and things. So as I was saying before we started recording, I feel like my voice is a little scratchier today, but our listeners will have to put up with that, I guess.
It's very distinguished. So getting a lot done, a lot accomplished.
My spaghetti Western voice, as I was joking beforehand, I guess.
That's great. We get to visit today with a mom that we met in Atlanta during the commencement festivities, Jennell Kvistad. Hi, Jennell. Good to see you again.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming to visit with us today. As I mentioned, we met in Atlanta for the commencement festivities we both had seniors graduating, class of 2023. And so how have you been since then? And catch us up a little bit.
Oh, well, it's interesting having a graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And she just turned 18 also. So just so much changes for these young adults at this time in their life. They're not only graduating from high school after just doing so much work and so many years of school, they're also becoming adults. They're having this like 18th birthday that's coveted, and it's a big deal, and they get to flex their muscles. And she keeps joking, like just today she started to ask me if she could go do something with her friend today, and she's like, wait a minute, I don't have to ask anymore, I can just tell you it's what I'm doing.
Well, yes.
And
Yes.
she's joking a little bit, she's a little bit serious too, but it's so fun to see them flexing new muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And really turning around and facing the world in a different way. Yeah.
Yep. And she's your first 18-year-old child, right? The first of your children.
Yes.
Yes, mine too.
Yes, we have 2 children. She's our eldest, and then we have another son who is entering his sophomore year.
Okay.
With Kolbe.
Yep. This is our first graduate, our first 18-year-old in the household. And yes, we've had a lot of conversations about this is not a light switch situation. Like, yes, you're an adult in many ways, but it's not like an overnight thing. Like
Right.
There's still a lot of growing to do. We still can be helpful to you. Yes, you're going to make you're going to learn a lot of hard lessons, but you don't have to learn all the lessons the hard way.
Right.
We're going to help you with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same for us. So like we have never been parents of an 18-year-old before. So we're going to have to kind of, right. Yes.
Well, and she's staying at home. She's chosen not to go to college, and she'll be living with us, and we own a small business, and she works full time there. Okay. So she'll be, traveling a lot. She's gonna, get out in the world and play a little bit, and she's got some travel plans with some friends, but she wants to spend a year working and traveling and just get some money in the bank and not have a bunch of pressure on her about what's next. She needs to spend some time really thinking about what's next for her. So
sure, that makes good sense. Yeah.
And I love having her at home. I'm so thrilled actually that she's not flying the nest right now, that we still get to live in the house with her, and she's a delightful person to just be around. So I'm happy about that.
Oh, wonderful. It's a new dimension to the relationship that you still get to very much enjoy. That's great.
Yeah.
we've just been having I've been having some of these same thoughts myself. I have a 19-year-old daughter who's just off her second year at college, but she's back for the summer, which is fantastic. I love having the whole family, but I've always tried as a father to kind of say, look, I can't, especially as they get older, I can't manage everything. I need you to want to be virtuous. I need you to want to do the right thing. But that's taken to another step when you get to 18, 19, and so it's like, okay, it is even more up to you now. It's because you can't babysit, and you shouldn't, right? And but it has been wonderful. A little hard as a father at times, but wonderful, yeah.
For sure. It's have a bit of okay, kind of, yes. We've poured so much in so far, joyfully, gratefully, willingly. And now it's to the point where now you do and it has been incrementally you do for yourself what you can do. And so now there's a lot, that's a whole new phase of that. So yes. Yeah.
Well, and we've talked, we're easing her into, it's not just all of a sudden, all right, you're paying for your own insurance. Okay. You're paying for your, easing her into that. But at the same time, she is working full time now. And this is a household that relies on many hands. And, so it's going to require some good conversation around what does that look like now that she's not in full-time school. So
but more privileges, but more responsibilities as well.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
Well, one of the things we've always worked with our kids on is, the amount of independence we give you is directly proportional to the amount of responsibility you show that you can handle. If you start showing, if you're going through a hard time and you're showing that you're not handling responsibility well, then we're going to help you and not give you as much independence. And it's not a punishment thing. It's we're helping you. We're helping you regulate that so that you see how it's done, and then you can do that more for yourself going forward. It's a time management thing. It's all of that. And so the same thing goes here. And I would say I'm anxious to see how that's going to play out in this new phase, but I don't want to be anxious about it. So I'm very eager and interested in how that's going to play out over the next year. How that dynamic of independence versus responsibility plays out with a 18 going on 19. She just turned 18, so it'll be good, I think.
Yes.
Well, we've known that all along since they were little, that everybody develops at their own rate. It's not a light switch. It's just there's still a lot of variance in where we all are, and we're still like that wherever we are. So you mentioned you have a Kolbe graduate now, a Kolbe alumna, and you have a son entering 10th grade. And we met in Atlanta so far, and you have a small business. Would you kind of broaden out a little bit and tell us how your family utilizes Kolbe's offerings and a bit more about yourself and your family?
Sure. So we live on 20 acres on a small island in the Pacific Northwest off the coast of Washington State. And the year-round population here is about 2,500. And so it's small. We're a very small community. My husband and I own a natural food store. And both of our children work there, and they're a part of a staff of about 12 that we employ. And so it's a ferry serviced island. So everything comes and goes by boat or ferry here. And we're a part of an archipelago of islands that are, of the archipelago, there are 4 ferry serviced islands where the ferry comes from the mainland and services 4 of the islands. And then the others are too small and too sparsely populated to warrant, the state ferries to stop there. So our parish, St. Francis, sits on a different island from ours. And so the priest, we usually have missionary priests, and they usually stay for about 3 years at a time, and they travel around the different islands on Saturdays and Sundays to perform mass. And they do daily mass at where the home parish is, where the main church is. But we get mass once a week, and it's on Saturdays. And oftentimes it's at 10:30 a.m. and sometimes it's at 1:30 p.m. And so we have a special, I don't know if it's a dispensation or what it is, but from the Archbishop to have mass at that time. Like our Sunday mass is at 10:30 a.m. on Saturdays. So it's a bit awkward and it's a bit challenging, but it's what we've got, and we just have to be grateful for what we get. And sometimes we have amazing priests, and sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, and sometimes we don't have a priest, and sometimes we have prayer services instead of mass. And so it's definitely can be a challenge to have a vibrant mass experience out here. So that's where we live. And my husband and I have lived out here for about 22 years. And we've been married on August 1st, it'll be 20 years. And in terms of our schooling experience out here, and how we came to Kolbe and how we utilize Kolbe now, we homeschooled early on with the kids. We pretty much didn't use any kind of curriculum. I guess you could call it unschooled until our oldest was in the 2nd grade. And I was diagnosed with cancer around that time when, our Sam was 3 and Frida was 6 when I was diagnosed. And so we continued to homeschool through that time. And, my treatment lasted 2 years, and it was a lot of time especially in the first year, a lot of time of me being away for treatment, because you can't get cancer treatment out here on the island. So, I would kind of go off island for all my treatments. And at one point during the treatment, I had to actually live in Seattle for 6 weeks in order to get daily treatment there. And during that time, we had a lot of family helping us. We had the kids enrolled in a kind of a small Waldorfy type program. And so that was on one of the other islands. And so we had family helping us kind of ferry the kids around. And we made it through that time. And then when Frida was in the 5th grade, we were using a curriculum by Oak Meadow. And I just realized about halfway through that year, I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is just it wasn't working. And so we sent her to a private school on one of the other islands. So for 2 years, during middle school, she went to a non-religious school on one of the other islands. And that we quickly realized that on a grocer's income, we weren't going to be able to continue to send 2 children to a private school. And also the travel was difficult. And so we pulled back, and we realized that our only other option at that point was the local public school. And while we weren't super excited about that, we felt that it was what we had to work with at the time. So we enrolled both kids into our local public school, and that lasted a few years before the lockdowns happened. So, and when the lockdowns happened, because of our business, most people were sent home out here in Washington State anyways. I don't know what lockdowns were like for you guys, but out here it was very severe, and people were told to basically go home and not leave their home unless they absolutely had to. Except unless you work at a grocery store, you keep going to work. So we were all of a sudden thrown into this. To say it was intense is very understated. We were it was probably one of the most challenging times of our life,
Yeah.
honestly. So while our teenagers were at home on their computers, Zooming with our local public school, we were working, 16-hour days with no days off for months at a time. And one day, I happened to be home looking over my son's shoulder at what his class was going to be working on that day. And my son had made a comment, yeah, it's science class. He's like, yeah, I guess we have health today. And I went, what? It's like, I wonder what you're going to be going over. And so I stood there while he tapped into class, and sure enough, it was gender ideology. And I told him, I said, shut your computer. That's it. And we weren't even told that they were going to be doing that. And so I said to my husband, I said, we're done. We can't do this anymore. And I marched into the principal's office and I said, I want to unenroll both of my children from the school. They were just floored, and I told them exactly why. And I wasn't going to lie about it, And so we didn't know what we were going to do, but initially, but my husband, Brian, said, I know what we're going to do. We're doing Kolbe, because he had looked into Kolbe before. And we had always wanted to send our kids to parochial school. My husband is a cradle Catholic. I'm a convert, but he's a cradle Catholic, and he went to parochial school he went to Seattle University. So he did, went to Catholic school all the way through. But we just didn't think it was an option for us out here because, unless it was an online, and we didn't want to do online before.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I know exactly what we're going to do. And we enrolled both kids. That was 2 years. So the kids just finished 2 years of Kolbe. So we have not looked back. It has been the most incredible blessing for our family to have joined the Kolbe family. I can't even say enough how much of a blessing it's been. So that's how we found Kolbe. That's how we utilize it. They are both kids have done full-time online. I knew from my previous experience homeschooling that I wasn't going to be able to do any kind of self-paced, any other option. I was like, nope, full-time online.
Sure, yeah.
So it's been wonderful. Yeah.
Good.
You're kind of the poster example of what we could say. Like we always say, well, you might have a great Catholic school in your neighborhood, and that's great if that's what's best for your family. But there are people out there who don't have a good Catholic school option. Well, here we go, the perfect example of somebody who doesn't have a good option available to them.
No, absolutely, and the only this is definitely not a downside, but one thing that it has brought up for us is, we've seen a little bit of what we've been missing up until now. And it's caused us to question whether we want to continue to live out here because of what we have not been able to provide our children with, a large church community and just an understanding of the larger Catholic community. So that is something that we grieve a bit, but we understand now that God has put us here, and our questions now need to be, why are we here? God, why have you put us here in this community? And really do some discernment about that before we decide to leave, because we don't want to just be reactionary and flee. We want to make, what's God's will for us?
Seems like that's a typical thing in the Bible. It's even when you're doing a good thing, the first question is that what God wants? So God wants to be worshipped. And you say, well, I want to worship in this way, though, instead of in this way. I want to serve him in this way. God say, no. What I want is this. So that seems like that's a very good question to ask, I guess.
It's so easy. It's so easy to just think what God wants for you. And sometimes you do. Sometimes it's just immediately apparent. And yes, it's quick, whatever the decision is, whatever the situation is, it's a quick pivot and you just know. But most of the time you have to pull back and say, wait, first do nothing, and and pray and discern before you act, because maybe you're missing out on something that God wants you to do.
Yes.
So challenging. And there's not just a cut and dried answer. There's not just one.
No.
That would be helpful sometimes, wouldn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're a convert, and when I first met you in Atlanta, and we were conversing briefly on those recordings, you mentioned hearing a couple of Kolbe moms on a Kolbecast episode, and that being part of your discernment into your conversion. Would you tell us that story?
Yes, I can tell you that story. So, I mean, I am like really a recent convert. So I would just join the church. I had my conversion experience in summer of 2021, and I joined the church. I was baptized Easter of 22.
Okay.
So, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It's been amazing, and I still marvel at it. I still can't sometimes I can't believe it. I'm like, wait a minute, what? I did that? After 20 years of being married to a Catholic and always telling him, just remember, I'm not going to be converting. And I would joke with him, in order for me to convert, I'm going to have a major conversion experience, like, Jesus in my pancake, or, Mother Mary descending down the stairs with her arms outstretched to me saying, come to me, child. And if something like that happens, hey, I'm no dummy, sign me up, but it's going to have to be dramatic. And in reality, what actually happened was both more subtle than that. It was not Jesus in my pancake, but it was also more profound than that, because I just marvel at how good God is at his job, bringing people to him, So, yeah, I grew up in a non-religious household, 2 divorces. And so even though it was, difficult at times, I was definitely loved and cared for by my parents. And as a child, so my grandfather on my father's side was a Presbyterian minister, and my grandparents were very instrumental in bringing Young Life to Western Washington. And so my grandfather was the director of a Young Life camp out here. So my parents always sent me off to camp every summer, and I loved going to camp. I loved it. Every year I looked forward to it so much. But there was always a bit of heartbreak also, because I have this distinct memory of leaving the Kumbaya campfires, right? And being told to go to my cabin and ask Jesus into my heart. And, but I was told, you have to do it in a right way. You have to ask him with a pure heart. You have to, or he won't come. And so I remember being this small child, like lying in my bunk bed at camp and saying, Jesus, come into my heart. And I'd wait and I'd wait and I'd open my eyes and look around, and I'd think, did he come? Is he there? And I just felt both anticipatory and wanting it, but also like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And it was confusing for me. And because my parents weren't religious, I would go home and I wouldn't have anybody to talk about any of that with. So then in middle school, I started going to a Methodist church with a friend and her family. I sought God a lot as a child. And So all of this stuff I was doing on my own. My parents were like, "You want to go to church?" What? When I told them I wanted to start going to church with this family. And so I, for several years, would go to church with this family. And again, I found myself abandoning it because I couldn't reconcile the idea that my parents were going to hell because they had not accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. And again, I had nobody to help me reconcile all of that. And as a child, that was traumatizing. I didn't want my parents going to hell.
Sure.
And so I couldn't believe it. I had to abandon Christianity in order to well, I had to. Otherwise, it was either I believe that my parents were going to hell or I don't. And I wanted to not believe that my parents were going to hell. And then, and then my 20s hit, and I kept seeking. It's like I found myself, like, I remember being very interested in goddess spirituality, right? And I would I really read up on that, and I started hanging out with people who were into it. And then I was invited into like this kind of Wicca thing. And I was like, okay. And I kind of started poking around. I was like, ooh, no. Like,
No,
it just,
Right.
it felt so wrong, but I didn't know why it felt wrong. And now it's like, as now I know God, and I look back at all these times in my life where God was so clearly walking with me and protecting me and guiding me. And so all these key moments where I was seeking him, but I was just looking in all the wrong places. And he would just say, "No, daughter, no." And he would lead me away from those things. And I was actually repelled. I remember feeling just so unsafe, even just reading about that. And not unsafe physically or even emotionally, but just my very soul felt unsafe. It felt so deeply unsafe. And then I have lived with chronic pain since my early 20s. And so I started doing yoga. And at first it was just for the pain issues and kind of helping with that. And then I became really curious about yogic philosophy. And again, in pursuing that, it felt so wrong. It felt the focus on the self. It felt lonely. It felt empty. And same thing with Buddhism. I looked into Buddhism, and I came away with the same sense of emptiness. And like, why am I being told to focus on just myself and some sort of divine thing in myself, And about that time, I met a really good friend who we're still very dear friends, and she's Christian, and she was the first Christian I met since my childhood that showed me that Christian people could be good and safe. And she really opened my heart back up to at least understanding that Christianity was not this bad thing. And now I see that God put her in my life to kind of open my heart a little, to be able to meet my husband, Brian, and be open to dating a Christian man. And and one other experience I had in high school that I wanted to mention about just God's hand being there. After I had kind of rejected Christianity, I was at a friend's house and a Ouija board was brought out, and I was invited to do it. And I had never done anything like that before. And it was a crazy experience. It was so real. And the question, I wasn't asking any questions. I just had my fingers on there, and a question was asked, who are we talking to? And the answer was Lucifer. And I just kind of rolled my eyes, but I was also like, holy goodness gracious, what's going on here? And then next question, this person that I was playing with said, do you want everyone in this room? And the answer was yes. And it said, can you get everyone in this room? And it said, no. Who can't you get? It spelled out my name, but with my biological father's last name that nobody in that room knew. And at first I thought they must be playing with me. But the look on their faces showed me that they weren't. And then the next question was, well, why can't you get her? And it spelled out G-O-D. And at that moment, my hands flew off the thing and I ran upstairs and I cowered in one of the upstairs bedrooms until everybody was done. And I just remember it left me feel, I was reeling, but I was reeling because I was asking, is God real? Are demons real? And so as scary of a situation as that was, it also broke something open in me that was true, you know. And anyway, so that's a little side note there, but what's that?
I was just going to say it's a great thing for people to keep in mind. I mean, because as Catholics, we're always talking about, there's angels, there's demons, and sometimes even Catholics can act like that's not the case when they delve into something like a Ouija board or seances or all of this stuff. And it's like, no, I mean, get away from that. If you're there, get away from that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, but it was one of those, I never forgot it. And it was one of those moments that, that was, I think, pivotal. Anyway, so I married my husband and I committed to raising our future kids Catholic. I went to church every week with him for many years. And then I stopped going to church because I was starting to have a very difficult time with much of what I was hearing in Mass. I didn't understand it. As a non-Catholic, I felt like a voyeur. I didn't know how to engage in the Mass as a non-Catholic. It was deeply awkward and uncomfortable. Do I kneel whenever? I mean, should I kneel when everyone else is kneeling, even though I'm not buying into all of this? Do I go up with my, and receive a blessing, or do I just stay sitting in the pew? What part of all of this do I recite with everyone else? Do I just stand there and not say anything? Because why would I say something if I don't believe it? Like, it was all so awkward. And the Hail Mary was literally the only prayer I could recite and have any kind of relaxation in my body. And it got to the point where it was almost unbearable to even be there, because I was just so confused about why I was there, wanting to support my husband and family, but I just didn't feel a part of it. And why would I go if I didn't feel a part of it? So I stopped going. I didn't go for a couple of years. And then Brian asked me to please come back. Please, it would mean so much to me, meaning him, if I would come back. So I did. And I found a way to kind of be there and be more comfortable, but it still was uncomfortable. But it wasn't unbearable anymore. And then the lockdowns came, and we were doing what we were doing at our business, but it felt like we were drowning. And then the race riots, and then the advancement of the disordered sexual ideologies just bearing down. And I just found myself questioning everything. And I just couldn't go on anymore not engaging in these issues. I couldn't ignore all of these things that were happening around me. And I started overhearing some of the podcasts that my husband listened to, like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and Matt Fradd, and just listening to them, uh, things just started coming into focus. And I started understanding these societal issues through the Judeo-Christian lens, and more specifically, the Catholic lens. And I started opening up to the idea of accepting God in my life. And looking back, it's like he knew that my heart was too hardened against Christianity. So he had to start with my head. He had to bring things to me in a different way. And so then I listened to a podcast on Mary that Brian sent me. And it's called Mary, Mother of the Church. And it's produced by the St. Paul Repository. And it's led by Father Robbie Lowe and Father Guy de Gainsford. I can't recommend this podcast enough. It's so beautiful. And I felt like I was floating listening to these two men, these two priests talk about Mary. And at the same time, we were joining the Kolbe family. So all of this was converging at the same time as we were joining the Kolbe family. And so kind of to bring this around to the Kolbecast, one day I was listening to, and I still have not gone back to try to find the exact podcast. I would kind of like to just, I don't know, it would be kind of fun to remember the exact one, but I remember it was a couple of moms and it was a couple of female administrators maybe, or teachers from Kolbe. And they were talking about, the subject was, I think, homeschooling middle schoolers maybe. And just the joy in their voices, the peace with which they approached their tasks. I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to have that for myself. And I remember thinking while I was listening, I thought, can I? I mean, is that available to me? And it just, so everything just, all these layers just kept piling on. So all of these things were laid down. And then this moment came that was what I see as my actual, like the moment of my conversion. I was working on a fencing project here. We have horses, and I was working on a fencing project, and you have to, like, there's all these little bits and pieces of fencing that if you're going to work on a project, you have to think about your project and you have to gather all your pieces together and put them in your bucket and walk all the way to the other side of the pasture with your bucket of fencing pieces. And you always forget one or two pieces. So you have to walk all the way back to, where your barn is or whatever, and get the piece that you missed. So I was in that moment. I was like, oh, I forgot this piece. And so I had to walk all the way back, and I'm walking across the pasture and I'm thinking fencing pieces. And this question came into my mind. It was just, what if you joined the church? And it was so weird and shocking. And I just stopped in the middle of the pasture. And I wish that there would have been a camera trained on me, because it would have been really funny. I stopped and I looked around, like, what is happening right now? Why did that thought just come into my head? And it was a clear question. It was like somebody was asking me the question. It wasn't me asking the question. It was like somebody else asking me the question. I didn't hear a voice or anything. It just was, this question was posed to me. And so I shook it off, but I didn't really shake it off. I went and got the fence piece. I went back down to finish my fencing project. And then when I was walking back up at the same part of the pasture, the question came charging in to my heart again. What if you joined the church? And from that moment, it was like a floodgate happened, and it was like the moment I'd been waiting for. And I felt like that giddy feeling that you feel when you're falling in love and you're so excited and you can't wait to see the person again. And so I sat with it for about 2 weeks because without saying anything, I did not want to say it to my husband because I was worried that I would change my mind. And I didn't want to break his heart. I didn't want to tell him I wanted to join the church only to say, oh, you know what, never mind. Yeah. Even though I knew I wasn't going to change my mind, I felt like I had to just hold it for a little bit, like a precious little thing, before I could let it out. And it was funny when I did. I thought I was going to take even more time, but my husband and I were in the kitchen and he was just standing at the counter chatting, eating something. And finally I couldn't not tell him anymore. It's like, this is ridiculous. I have to tell him. I was like, I have to tell you something. And he was mid food in his mouth, like mouth open. And he looked at me like, oh no, and I said, I've decided to join the church. I mean, this is so out of the blue for him. And I mean, he had to pick his jaw up off the floor. And what he said back to me was so perfect. He gathered himself together and he blinked a couple times and he said, well, you've always been good at following your gut. And that was that. So yeah, I joined RCIA and was baptized last year. So that's my crazy conversion story.
Beautiful.
But not crazy, just a normal, just your average everyday too. It's both. I love how it's both profound. I mean, to me, it's obviously life-changing and drop to my knees profound, but it's also just an everyday conversion. So
I'm a convert myself, and at one point my wife's grandmother was collecting stories about converts, and I got to put my story in her book. But the title is Chosen, again, because as you're telling your story, and for me, it's every convert. I think I mean, it could be called as well, but I think it sounds like you recognize that from before it was even a possibility, you were chosen, you were selected, and then called. It's such a lovely thing for us to remember, even for those who have been Catholics all their life. They were chosen as well, and they just didn't have to go through all of the ups and downs and through all of the obstacle courses that maybe a non-Catholic did, or maybe they do. But
I think it's a different obstacle course.
Yes.
And a lot of the cradle Catholics that I've talked to, because I expressed early on some grief that I kind of had about not finding the church sooner. And I kind of had this panic moment for a while, this panic feeling for a while of all that I missed out on, and well, this grief of not having such a close feeling to God. But so many cradle Catholics have told me that they have experienced these long stretches of, a dry faith period, and that what they wouldn't give for my zeal now and my excitement, and that it excites them just to talk to me now. And so I think that it is just a different obstacle course. And I was so glad that they talked me down off that ledge, because I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel, sad about my journey to Christ. It's been a joyful one. It's been a hard one. And but at this moment, I feel like I'm home finally. And it is the most incredible feeling. I think that I can handle my suffering. Just feels so different now. I feel I have a place to put it, and something to suffer for. Whereas before it was just suffering for the sake of suffering. Mm. So no, we all have our faith journey, and that sounds so cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah, in agreement. And it's interesting to reflect back, as to hear your story and then to think about all of those things. So, I mean, I guess you have the gift of your story now to share, that we will be sharing with the people, our listeners, and which is so wonderful, because you think, well, what is that God was doing there, and how was he calling me, and what was the point of that sorrow, or that, difficult time, or that call, or it's, so they're all there, in God's omnipotence and his omniscience. He's put it all together to call you to him, and to touch those around you, and to bring us all together as our church. But it's just a wonderful thing to reflect even on that, his providence and his love for us, I think.
Well, and I still, I don't even know the word, but I do think about the obstacle course he took me through, and how random it seems, but also how perfect it seems, and intentional, and every bit planned. I truly feel that God was preparing me to say yes to him. And he knew exactly what I needed in order to get there. And he gave me everything I needed to get there.
In the order you needed to receive them.
In the order I needed to receive them. And what if any one of those pieces wasn't there? It might not have been enough. Yeah. What if the Kolbecast wasn't there at that moment? When I had maybe just listened to that Amazing Mary podcast. It all built on each other. Every one of those pieces built on each other. And I do joke a little bit too. I do think that maybe God, obviously God, well, I do think he got a little impatient with me. I do think he was finally like, I'm walking through the pasture, and he's finally like, okay, I've had enough. Daughter, you're mine. Let's do this. Now's the time. Join the church.
I love hearing conversion stories. I hardly ever know what to say in response to them beyond, that's amazing and beautiful. And without feeling like I'm going to say something just hokey, but it's heartfelt. Like I could see God working that whole time. You didn't know it at the time. And that gives me hope in my own circumstances when they're challenging. Like there's something, this is working towards something if I cooperate.
Right.
I hope it's not too much of a leap, or otherwise, I don't know what the word is, but thinking back to the start of our conversation, how our eldest children are venturing out into a new phase of life. Like we have had a lot of, it has been within our purview to make a lot of decisions for them. It's not so much that way anymore for us. And it's this new chapter of, okay, it's really a different, I keep using the word chapter. I'm going to need to find a new word pretty soon, but it can tell that hopefully I'm coming across like his story now to all the more. So, yeah.
Well, and parenting doesn't stop when they turn 18. And, I played a little joke on my mom when I was diagnosed with cancer. I know that sounds kind of dark and morbid, but you kind of have to joke with cancer sometimes, because otherwise, anyways, you have to have a sense of humor. But um I was 39 when I was diagnosed, and for obvious reasons, my mom was kind of shattered by the news, and it was very hard. And as we moved through, and she wasn't so shattered anymore, she started helping, and I gave her this magnet that said, "The first 40 years of parenting are always the hardest." And as I gave it to her, I was like, "Sorry to kind of, kick it to you again, Mom, with this," but so, but it's true. I mean, even in that moment, here comes my mom charging into the situation to parent me and to mother me and to help me. I couldn't have made it through the first year of my treatment without my mother. I mean, she showed up so strongly for me. She um, came to the island 4 days out of every week for the first 6 months, and weeded my garden, cleaned my house, took care of the kids, cooked for us. I mean, um, so you just don't stop. I mean, I'm telling you this because of what you said about we're putting our kids out into the world, and as long as we're alive and our children are alive, we're parenting them. It just, the dynamic changes a little based on the different stages of life. So
For many, it becomes well, for most, I guess, in today's world, it just becomes a bit harder because it always used to be, very few people left the area that you grew up in,
right.
but now people just fly off all over the place. I mean, we're already having sort of not deep discussions about like, well, okay, what happens when all the children are out of the house and living in rural Arkansas? Well, it's probably not likely. Most of them are going to end up in our area here. They're going to fly all over the place. And how do we still, I mean, you can do it virtually. We can be virtual parents, I guess, for all, but how do you manage all of that? And it's just it doesn't stop, but it's a little just like developing a community at Kolbe Academy with all of our families all over the country and the world. You have to be a little bit more deliberate about it, I think, than maybe the fact that everybody could just come over for Sunday night dinner at mom's house or whatever. That's but it can be done, and it needs to be done. I know. So
Well, and it's easy for young adults, I think, to feel dropped by their parents when what the parents were trying to do is give their child, who is now an adult, um, the freedom that they've quote unquote earned, maybe. But so it's a delicate dance, just reminding your child that no matter how old you are, I'm here for you. Um, in whatever way I can be, and I will never drop you. So it's I think that we need to be careful about giving them too much space. I think we need to. I would rather be a little annoying. Um, and what you doing? You need anything? How's it going? Where are you going? What's going on? I'd rather be a little annoying than have them feel like I'm not there for them.
I would like to encourage every parent, I guess, out there, but particularly moms, to be like Saint Monica, to be like the Blessed Mother for us, who never stops calling you back. I mean, so even though the child might say, "I want nothing to do with this anymore. I'm living my own life," as parents, and again, I think as mothers in particular, never give up. Always keep that pestering, as gently as you can, but it will pay off in the end. It will pay off, that child to know that they're always loved, no matter what they've done, no matter what's going on. They can come back to mom and dad, but mom especially. Mom always needs to be there.
I agree.
It's just that registering, like, I'm here for you. Yeah. This always happens when we record our Kolbecast conversations. We have sort of an idea of what we're going to talk about, and then we get going and we stick close to what our plan was, but then there's this richness that develops that we couldn't have have seen coming that forms the conversation as it's intended. And I see a lot of that in this conversation today. It's really been quite the blessing and joy to have the time with you to visit and just have this time together.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I in my daily life, out here, in a rural area with not many Catholics, and I find, I listen to a lot of, kind of Catholic content on as I'm going about my day. So I find myself always listening to Catholic podcasts, whether it's, again, Pints with Aquinas, or Girl Boss Interrupted, or Called and Caffeinated, or all these wonderful people. I don't ever get to talk back.
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity to actually, be a part of it and put my 2 cents in. Sometimes I do talk back, and then I have to realize, oh yeah, no, they're not actually listening to you, Jennell. You you might have just said something, but Matt Fradd isn't hearing you.
You can tell those are good podcasts, though, because
Yeah.
you think you could jump in. Yes. Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about them. Like, I would not get to be a part of this conversation in any context if it were not for this podcast. So that's one of the things I have always enjoyed about them. And you mentioned that actually when we talked in Atlanta, how you have been seeking out immersive experiences with a broader Catholic community. I remember that stuck with me.
Yeah. No, we're actually, our son is getting an opportunity to go to Steubenville Northwest conference next month with, there's a parish on the mainland in Anacortes called St. Mary's, and an amazing parish with a very faithful and wonderful priest there, Father Mel. And so we get to tag along with them. Sam gets to go with a small group of young people over to Steubenville Northwest, which we're really excited about. And I don't know, I'm kind of putting this out there. I am feeling a little fire to maybe go to Seek. To kind of drag my whole family to Seek in January.
The last one looked amazing. Yeah.
I know. And my husband and I, after going to March for Life in January, and then going to Atlanta for the graduation, we need these experiences of really being surrounded by Catholics. I know that at March for Life, it wasn't all Catholics over there, but there were a lot. And but we need to really be nourished by a critical mass of people in person. We need that to actually see each other's faces and reach out a hand and actually touch somebody. So we're really wanting to do more of that. Every travel experience we have now, we're trying to make sure there's a spiritual component to it. So that's how we're getting it now.
Opens up a lot of new possibilities too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very galvanizing. Just the times together like that. Jennell, I'll be praying for you and your family, and as you all write this next chapter, I'll just stick with that. I've already used it enough times this episode. I'll still search
hey,
for
we
a new
all
one
love
next
books.
time.
There's nothing wrong with the chapter.
That's right. Well, I'll be thinking of you all. It was such a pleasure meeting you in Atlanta, and I've been looking forward to this day to get to visit with you again. Please keep in touch and know of our prayers for your family and our gratitude for you for coming to talk to us. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we pray as a family for the Kolbe community. And there's so much we couldn't be doing without being a part of the Kolbe family. So thank you.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.